G'day cobbers, welcome back to the bush. In this episode of Lockup's Full Driving, we're comparing the Thumper Max with the ARB Twin and the TJM Twin. Inflation pressures, current draw and plenty more. First up though, let's check out the price difference. On the left hand side here we got a 0 to 800 and that's Australian dollars as of September 23. The ARB isn't cheap, it comes in at $728 recommended retail price. But the TJM, well, that's slightly more expensive at $769. And you need to take into consideration the TJM actually needs additional wiring in order to run it in your vehicle. So that'll be about an extra $50 if you're good with DIY. And if you're not, well, you'll be extorted by workshop rates of the local auto electrician. The Thumper Max, however, well, that comes in at $169. So a relative bargain in comparison with the others, and you can often find it on special at $118. In fact, the ARB Twin is 331% dearer. You can buy 3 Thumper Maxes for the price of an ARB Twin and still have change left over. When it comes to the TJM, well, you can buy 3.5 Thumper Maxes for the price of the TJM Twin. So as far as price is concerned, the Thumper Max is a relative bargain. But is it in the long term? What about performance? That's what we're going to look at later on in the video. Now when it comes to weight, the ARB Twin isn't exactly a lightweight and tips the scales at 8.4 kilograms. The TJM, well, that's even heavier at 12.3 kilograms. What about the Thumper Max? Well, that tips the scales at 8.2 kilograms. But you need to take into consideration both the ARB Twin and the TJM Twin are designed for solid mounting in your vehicle, whereas the Thumper Max is a portable unit. So the ARB Twin, only 2% heavier, but the TJM Twin is 50% heavier. Ask any 200 series owner, do they want to carry that extra mass? Probably not. So let's run you through the testing setup. So we've got a regulated 5-volt power supply there. That heads down to the pressure transducer. That outputs a variable voltage depends on how much pressure is in the tyre. Also displayed on that gauge up there. Now it puts its output to the mushy meter here. Now the mushy meter displays onto the mobile phone. You can also data log. Also got this here, which is a current clamp, and now a current clamp will tell us exactly how much juice that Thumper Max is using. Okay, now we've seen the setup, let's get on with the testing. So now let's check out how loud it is with the dB meter here. So let's turn it on. And it seems to be sitting in between 78 and 79 dB. So let's compare that with the TJM and the ARB. Now when it comes to noise, the ARB tips the scales at 78 dB. And the TJM, well, 76 dB. And you may well be saying to yourself, that's not a lot of difference. But you need to take into consideration dB is actually a ratio. It's not a unit of loudness. It's not a linear unit of loudness. It's actually logarithmic. And what I mean by that is, let's say if you go from 70 dB to 80 dB, that'd be perceived doubling of loudness. So the TJM is actually quite a bit quieter than the ARB Twin. But what about the Thumper Max? Well, the Thumper Max tips the scales at about 78.5 dB. So it's roughly the same loudness as the ARB Twin, but both are definitely louder than the TJM Twin. And that's a consideration if you've got it mounted in your interior. Now for the 10-minute load test. So I put a ball valve on the exit here so I can maintain about 100 PSI in the line, so it's actually working a bit. And we've got a timer down here. I've set up the FLIR camera, so let's fire it up. Set that timer going. And off we go. Okay, now that's the 10-minute torture test completed. Let's check out the results versus the ARB and the TJM. Now when it comes to maximum cylinder head temperature after that 10-minute torture test, well, the ARB tipped the FLIR over at 108 degrees Celsius. And the TJM was only 1.2 degrees Celsius hotter at 109.2 degrees Celsius. What about the Thumper Max? Well, we saw 107.3 degrees Celsius. So there's not a lot of difference between the three. Only a couple of degrees Celsius. In this test, what I'll be doing is checking the pressure at which the pressure switch in the Thumper Max turns off and turns back on. And I'll be charging up that fire extinguisher here. So firstly, I'll get the data logging enabled. There we go. Turn on the compressor and you'll be able to check here what pressure turns off at and what pressure turns back on at. There we go, it's turned off at 121 psi. So I'll start dumping the pressure very, very slowly, and we'll see what pressure it turns back on at. And there we go, it turned back on at about 82 psi. I'll have to have a look at the footage. Okay, let's compare the results with the ARB and the TJM. Now, if you haven't seen our ARB Twin versus TJM Twin video, click the link up above. If you're enjoying the video so far, consider subscribing to the channel and ring that bell icon and you won't miss out on future content like this. Now, for the price of a cup of coffee, you can get exclusive early access to videos like this on our Patreon. There's a link down in the doobly-doo. Anyway, back to the episode. Now let's look at the pressure switch test. The ARB stopped the clocks at 146 psi, negative 2.6% shy of the mark, and restarted at 122 psi, a full negative 9.7% shy of the mark. And that's substantial when you're waiting for that compressor to kick back in to keep charging those tanks when you're moving from tyre to tyre during the inflation process. The TJM stopped the clocks at 112 psi, negative 6.7% shy of the mark, and turned back on at 88 psi, negative 2.2% shy of the mark. What about the Thumper Max? Well, there we go, and the result is 124 psi, negative 0.8% shy of the mark, and 86 psi turned back on at negative 4.4% shy of the mark. Actually, the Thumper Max is the most accurate pressure switch out of all three. And now we're going to test exactly how good this stock pump is. And we'll be going from 18 to 38 psi in a 315/75/16, or commonly known as a 35-inch tyre. So I'll get the amperage clamp, zero that out, beautiful. Okay, we'll put that onto the positive lead. And we're at 18 psi on the tyre. Let's go out to 38 psi. I'll start the data logging on the mushy meter, and there we go. And off we go. And that's it, we're back up to 38 psi, so let's now compare the TJM and the ARB. Now let's get down to the nuts and bolts of it. The 18 to 38 psi 35-inch tyre Thumper Max versus ARB versus TJM. Firstly, the ARB, 82 seconds, and you can see the current draw was around about 55 amps. The TJM, 75 seconds, so substantially faster, but it was drawing around about 80 amps, so a fair bit more current. What about the Thumper Max? Well, the Thumper Max was substantially slower than either, at 113 seconds, and it drew about a consistent 92 amps. So not only is it the slowest, it's the most inefficient as well. In fact, the ARB was 38% faster, and the TJM was a massive 51% faster. That's not good for the Thumper Max. In this next test, we're going to check how long it takes to fill up these two fire extinguishers here from 0 psi right through to when the pressure switch cuts out. So let's start the timer and get on with it. And there we go, 2 minutes and 16 seconds. Let's compare that to the ARB and the TJM. So now, let's take a look at how long it took to fill those two fire extinguishers. Those two empty 9 kilogram fire extinguishers have a capacity, a volumetric capacity of about 22.4 litres. Plus the hoses, of course. Now the ARB Twin did it in 4 minutes and 4 seconds, but that's to 150 psi. The TJM Twin, 2 minutes and 48 seconds to roughly about 120 psi. And the Thumper Max, well, that took it through to 2 minutes and 14 seconds at about 125 psi. Now, I've always heard that the filters are the first thing you should modify on these Thumper Maxes. So to gauge that and whether it's actually a worthwhile modification, what I've done is just remove them and we'll run up again in this 35-inch tyre, the 315/75/16, from 18 psi to 38 psi. So I'll start the data logging going. There we go. Data logging is working. Okay, so there we go, 18 to 38 psi, and off we go. Okay, so we're back up to 38 psi. So let's compare filters and no filters. So is it worthwhile modifying those air filters for more flow with the standard pump? Well, with filters, 113 seconds. Now without filters, well, almost identical. As you can see, 115 seconds without filters. If you have a standard pump, there is zero benefit to modifying those filters. You won't get any additional performance. That's it, done and dusted. I'm not saying if you modify the pump, there won't be substantial gains down the track, but with the standard pump, just leave those filters as they are. So what do we think in the end? Well, it uses substantially more current than the ARB, or even the TJM for that matter, but has less performance than even the ARB. Having said that, it is less than 1/3 of the price than either of those two other competitors. So there's that. But where I think this compressor's strong point is we can modify the crap out of it. In fact, I'm not going to be happy till I get this thing pumping harder than the TJM Twin. So drop your modification suggestions down in the doobly-doo and we're going to get into it. Righto guys, now if you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, and if you didn't, by all means, give it a thumbs down. Not once, not thrice, but twice. Thanks guys, we'll see you in the next one.